Hey everyone, it's Marvin. Thanks so much for listening to Books and Boba. I just wanted to take a quick second to remind you that Books and Boba just launched our Patreon to help support our future endeavors. Rira and I have been running Books and Boba for the last 6.5 years, and we've always talked about wanting to do more, including expanding our content offerings, being able to go to book events and do more coverage. And so to help us get closer to those ambitions, we started a Patreon to help us grow and to better support books by Asian and Asian American authors. We are offering 2 tiers for our Patreon. The first is our regular Boba member coming in at $3 a month, which will give you access to our brand new Books and Boba Discord server so you can engage with your fellow Books and Boba Club members and also Rira and myself in real time. This is where we'll be aiming to move the bulk of our book club discussions, but rest assured we'll still have a presence on Goodreads as well. And our premium tier is our Honey Boba member tier coming in at $5 a month, where in addition to access to our Discord server, you'll also get access to our monthly Boba Chats, a bonus podcast where Rira and I and some guests will get together each month and have a more casual discussion on stuff that may or may not be book related, as well as answer some listener Q&A. Honey Boba members will also have access to a poll to help decide an official Books and Boba book pick once per quarter. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, support Books and Boba on Patreon by going to patreon.com/booksandboba. As always, Rira and I really appreciate your support. All right, thanks for listening, and I'm on with the show.
You're listening to Whoa! Potluck.
And welcome to Books and Boba, a book club and podcast featuring books by Asian and Asian American authors. My name is Marvin Yeh.
And I'm Rira Yu.
And on this episode of Books and Boba, we have another one of our author interviews for you. We're talking to Mia P. Manansala, the author of the upcoming cozy mystery, Arsenic and Adobo.
This book made me so hungry. As you can tell from the title, you can expect a lot of Filipino American food. So make sure you eat lunch or dinner before you start reading.
Yeah, the book comes out on May 4th. We had a really great conversation with Mia about her novel, about her love of cozy mysteries and writing about Filipino culture. Rira, as a connoisseur of these cozy mysteries, how did this one stack up for you?
I really like the fact that Lila, who is the main character in this book, was actually pretty good at following up on clues. Because we've read cozy mysteries where a citizen becomes like the main suspect and they have to like do their own investigation, and they turn out to be not that great. They bumble through. A lot of the clues are accidental, but with Lila, I think it was pretty. I was pretty impressed by her, I guess, like self-awareness.
Always love a competent cozy detective,
and also love meddling aunties in anything. They're really fun to read.
Yeah, this book has all the greatest hits. Please enjoy our conversation with Mia. Hey everyone, it's Marvin. So we've been in COVID lockdown for the last year, and one of the biggest bummers is that I haven't been able to go visit Asia for over a year. Before the lockdown, I used to go at least once a year to visit family and friends. And those of us who have been to Asia know that one of the best parts about going to Asia is access to Asian snacks. You know what I'm talking about, all those great chip flavors that you just can't find in the States. But that's why it's awesome that our sponsor Irvin's, Singapore's #1 snack, has finally made its way over to the States. Irvin's is the original salted egg chip using real salted duck egg that has been brined for 30 days, then steam cooked and hand mixed into potato chips, fish skins, and cassava chips. Then real salted duck egg yolks, fresh curry leaves, and red peppers are diced right into the bag. Now, for those of you who haven't tried salted duck egg or 咸鸭蛋, it's a unique savory experience that will leave you wanting more. Recently, I've acquired a couple bags of the spicy version of Irvin's chips, and let me tell you, it's like a flavor bomb in your mouth. It's not just spicy, but it's Asian spicy, which of course is 1,000 times better. Now, Irvin's chips carry a higher price point than regular chips, but that's because Irvin's is a gourmet snack with all real food ingredients literally baked into the chip. And trust me, it's quality that you can taste. Visit eatirvins.com to order your Irvin's chips today and use the promo code BOBA, all caps, for free shipping on any order. That's eatirvins.com with promo code BOBA spelled out for free shipping on your dangerously addictive snacks.
Hey, I'm Phil Yu, and you may know me from a blog called Angry Asian Man.
And I'm Jeff Yang, author, journalist, and celebrity dad.
We host a podcast called They Call Us Bruce, an unfiltered conversation about what's happening in Asian America.
Each week or so, we host a discussion about some of the most vital and interesting topics in our pop culture and our community, bringing in guests who are shaping and informing this thing called Asian America from Hollywood to D.C. and beyond.
We got media, entertainment, food, family, politics, representation.
The good, the bad, the WTF of it all.
So check us out wherever you get your podcasts or at theycallusbruce.com.
Peace.
Peace.
And we are here with author Mia P. Manansala, the author of Arsenic and Adobo. She is also the winner of the 2018 Hugh Colton Award and the 2018 Eleanor Taylor Bland Crime Fiction Writers of Color Award. Welcome, Mia.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
It's always great to bring award-winning Asian authors onto this podcast.
For unpublished works, but yes.
It's all good.
I mean, it still counts.
Yeah.
It's still very impressive.
You can still technically say award-winning author.
I mean, like, those awards are for my now soon-to-be debut novel. So I guess you're right. It counts. It counts.
It counts.
I'm not gonna.
Counts.
Like, in publishing, you need to celebrate every little thing. So you're right. You're right.
Yeah. So how are you doing? How's COVID publishing life going for you?
Well, my book, like, as of this recording, my book comes out in 3 weeks. So it's that weird thing of like, I've been waiting over a year for this to happen, and now that it's starting to happen, I'm like, oh no, what? Like, like people are gonna be reading my words and having opinions, and it's a weird, super exciting and super scary time right now.
Your book is a book of the month choice, and that's a pretty big deal too. So, like, congratulations.
Yeah, I think that's also what's kind of adding to this weird, like, in between feeling, because I see my book, like, on Instagram, people are tagging me in photos, but it hasn't officially released. So I'm like, is this real? Like, is this actually happening?
It's called marketing. It's called marketing. Not a lot of authors get it, but you're very lucky. And I think your book definitely deserves it, because I had so much fun reading it. So I like to read author acknowledgments, usually like before I start reading the book, just to like get a feel for who they are. And I noticed that you thanked your parents for being supportive of your non-Asian career as a writer. And it said that your mother introduced you to cozy mysteries. And I just wanted to ask you, like, was that like your foray into your love of reading and writing, or was it was that passion earlier in your childhood?
Like, it was a little bit earlier. So, like, I'm very grateful for my parents for, like, never, when they knew I wanted to be a writer, and they were cool with it as long as I had a backup plan. It's my grandparents who had the issue. So we can always talk about that later, because that's always fun. Honestly, I can't remember how I got into reading, but, like, I started really, really young. I kind of taught myself, and, like, my mom introduced me to books later on. So she worked at Walden Books for like a decade. You remember those? God, I miss Walden Books.
I remember those.
She worked there for like a decade when I was like in like from like middle school throughout like almost all of high school and most of college. And apparently when you work there, like as booksellers, like they get ARCs, so like I knew what ARCs were before I even got into writing. So like we get all of those. And apparently you could also like check out books if you're an employee there, as if it were a library. So like she could check out like 2 books a week. And she would like start bringing home novels, and she knew how much I loved reading. And this was like, a cheap way for me to get the books I wanted. So she introduced me to like Mary Higgins Clark and all that stuff. And it was never, oh, you're only 10 years old. Maybe you shouldn't be reading these murder books. She's like, oh, here, I really like this. I think you'll like it too. So it was definitely partly her. I also, like, we all grew up in like it was a multi-generational household. So it was my maternal grandparents' house. So that's why, like, I kind of blame that for some of like my old lady tendencies, because like I grew up watching like Matlock and Murder, She Wrote, with my grandparents. So I feel like crime fiction and mystery related things, that love did start from a very young age, thanks to my family.
So when did you transition from reader to writer?
Like, I kind of dabbled a bit, like in high school and also like in elementary school. I was an English major in college, but I never took like a creative writing class because those were expensive and they were late at night. My parents didn't want me coming home late. So I only really started taking writing seriously, maybe I want to say like 2015. So after graduating, I spent about 3.5 years teaching English in a small town in South Korea. And when I came home, I was like, I found myself, living in the same place, doing the same things, working, like a part-time job. And I was like, is this it? Like I was going to be turning 30. So like that was my moment. I was just like, whatever happened to writing? Like, wasn't that your big dream? So, I specifically remember I just Googled like creative writing Chicago. and then I kind of looked at the options that were there. And one of the first options was for a 1-day mystery writing workshop. And I was like, oh, I love reading mystery. Like, I'd never thought about writing mystery. I kind of always thought I'd be kidlit or maybe fantasy, because that's kind of what I grew up on. But like, I knew I loved reading mystery. So I was like, why not? It's 1 day. I can actually afford this particular class. And like, from that point on, like, I was a mystery writer.
That's amazing. I feel like if there's anything I would be most afraid to write, it would be mystery.
It would be mystery.
Like, just constructing a good murder mystery just seems so complicated.
It's a lot of times when I'm writing it, I'm just like, why did I have to choose, because there are just so many moving pieces, and like you get to you finish a draft and you're like, oh, clues, like there should be like things to help people figure this out, right? My very first book, like I didn't know who the killer, like I got the killer wrong. Like I thought I knew who was the killer.
Oh wow.
And I got partway through and I was like, no, that doesn't feel right. And I'm like, well, let's rewrite this entire thing agagen.
Oh,
I mean, you're the author. You're allowed to change who the killer is. No one would know unless you told them.
Yeah, so it's a lot of fun. But then I also have so much respect for people who write like in other genres, like I said, like fantasy, like I dream someday of writing like kidlit fantasy based on like Filipino mythology, and just like that world building, people are like, oh, you're making it up. It's fine. Like, but you still have to research so much that goes into it. And I can't even wrap my head around it. I'm like, that's a future Mia to worry about. Like, she cannot handle this right now.
Yeah.
We'll stick with the dead bodies.
So you also have a content warning for this book. And I thought that was like really interesting. I've been seeing a little bit more of those coming into like YA and like a couple of other genres. But you said in your content warning that one of your sensitivity readers in the Philippines, they were triggered by like the evidence planting and police intimidation that's present in the book. And I thought that was really interesting because those are just common things in mystery tropes, not even just books, but television shows. Like that is just like a normal episode of, I don't know, like Law and Order, like whatever cop shows and like crime shows we have here. So I thought that was like interesting because that like we're seeing this from a very American lens, but like back in the motherland, it's considered triggering. So I just wanted to know your thoughts. Like, what was your reaction to it? And like the decision to make the content warning in the beginning of the book?
Yeah. So, I'm a Filipino American in the Midwest writing a Filipino American character in the Midwest, but I grew up in like a working class majority Latinx neighborhood. I don't speak Tagalog, right? What I know of my culture is strictly through my family. I don't have a huge community that I could draw on, And so, yes, obviously I'm just one perspective, right? Like I'm not meant to be like the voice of the Filipino American. But I also wanted to fill in some of those gaps in like my cultural knowledge, right? Because there are some Tagalog phrases and things in there. And it's like, I want to make sure those are right, and like my mom helped some, but I wanted like an objective outside perspective. And also, some of, a lot of the characters on there are immigrants, right? Like I was born and raised in Chicago, but a lot of the characters in the books were born and raised in the Philippines. They came later on. Obviously, like those intergenerational differences are part of the book, but I kind of wanted to give a better rounded perspective, if that makes sense. So like that's originally what I was looking for, right? Like the language and the culture. So when she gave me that note, like I was shocked, right? Because like as you said, like, and I say it in the content warning, like I was looking at it as an American. I was looking at it as like a mystery reader where like it's, because this is a cozy, and right, for people who don't know what cozies are, they're like the hallmark of murder mysteries.
Hallmark
right?
of murder mysteries.
Yeah, right? Like that's why they're called, they're like, even though there's dead bodies, it's supposed to be light. They're usually humorous. You go in knowing that there's a happy ending. So like for me, I was like, it's not, there's nothing like gory or sexual or anything that I would have to warn people about. But for people who are not American, for people who are not familiar with some of these tropes, because like one of the best things that's actually making me really happy are the people who are reaching out who are like, I don't usually read mysteries, or I don't even know what a cozy is, but I'm so excited to see a Filipino American protagonist. I'm so excited to support a Filipino American author, so they're picking up my book, not knowing these kind of like general tropes. So, for readers like that, the last thing I want to do is like cause harm, especially when they're just like so excited to have this kind of representation. So, things that seem like no big deal to me, it's not on me to judge what's okay for someone else. Like, it's not for me to tell you like, no, it's not a big deal. You're making too much of it, because that's not my experience, So, especially for people who are homeland Filipinos, like we, there are huge differences between a diaspora Filipino and homeland Filipino, but I want them to still feel safe, when they pick up a book, my books especially. And so like I hope like that kind of care came through in my note and in the pages as well.
I'm sure it did. I really do wish that more books going forward use content warnings, because how do you know if you should avoid a certain work because of those triggering factors? Like you won't know until you start reading the book, and by then it's a little bit too late. I gotta say, you got me in the first line of the book, and first lines in books are very, very difficult. The first line in this book is, my name is Lila Macapagal, and my life has become a rom-com cliche. And this is very funny to me because Lila thinks that she's in a rom-com, but literally like maybe a page later, there's like a dead body in like her, the restaurant. And it happens to be her ex-boyfriend, who I immediately hated and wished that he would be dead. And sure enough, he died. And I was just like, oh, yes, like this is definitely my type of book. So I just want to like hear, like, how did you get Lila's voice? How did you like develop her character? Because she's really sassy, independent, but also very vulnerable because she's 25 years old. And she's kind of at this weird crossroad of like, what do I do with my life? And I think that's very relatable.
Yeah, so I love talking about this because I was chatting with like my mentor, Kelly Garrett, like one day, and like we were just joking about how so many like cozy mysteries actually have like rom-com tropes in them. Because like if you follow a lot of like it's almost always a small town setting. Usually the protagonist like didn't stay in her hometown the whole time. Like she left. It's always a she. Like 99.9% of the time it's a she. Left home for the big city, had to return for some reason. Um, and then, like they usually like fall in love, if not romantic love, then at least with like the town that they see, in a different light, again, very Hallmark, which is why I used that as a, as an explanation earlier. So we were joking about that one day and I was just like, oh my God, cozies are just rom-coms with dead bodies. And like, I really loved that idea. But I didn't start working on it right away. I was on the train to work one day. And that first line that you said, it popped into my head fully formed, like with the character's name. So people are like, oh, how did you choose the names? I was like, I don't know. Like that was the name. And so I wanted to explore that. So like I pulled out my phone and I started writing it down because like I knew this is a character that I needed to get to know better. Like this was my next story that I had to write. And then on that ride, the second line also came. So they basically came together. It was like, I think the second line is something like, not many romantic comedies have Asian American leads or dead bodies, but more on that later. And I was like, oh, that's the story. This is the whole, so it was like a really weird, like serendipity kind of thing. Like I didn't have to work for that line or that story idea. It really just came and I had to figure out like, well, okay, she, like you said, she thinks she's like a rom-com heroine. Who is she? Like what kind of person would come with that kind of sensibility? And I kind of worked backward from there. I kind of took a little bit from like Sweet Home Alabama with Reese Witherspoon because I knew in my head she kind of had to be like a big fish in a small pond kind of character. Thinks she's a little too good for everybody, but she needs to get knocked down a few notches. Like that's kind of where I started and she grew from there.
I think I would have liked that movie more if there was a dead body. Just to be perfectly honest. But yeah, we've read a couple of cozies for this book club. I mean, we've read Mimi Lee Gets a Clue by Jennifer J. Chow, and we've read Naomi Hirahara's book. And, like I noticed that this was my first cozy novel, my first mystery novel with a Filipino-American sleuth. It was very new to me. And I just want to like hear your thoughts on like what, like how important it was for you to incorporate Filipino culture and have like a multi-generational family in your book.
Yeah. So, like a common theme, like on this show, like I've noticed, but it's everyone we're writing the books that we wish we had as a kid or that we could even now as an adult, I'm in my mid 30s and I'm like, why can I still not find, at least easily? I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm saying, why can I not easily find these? Like, why are these not mainstream? Why are these not being marketed? Right. And so it's, like, again, the second largest group. We're huge, but very little representation. A lot of it is either like lit fic, right? And literary fiction, very beautiful, very important topics. Not my jam, right? Not what I want to write, should I say. Perfectly fine reading it, not what I want to write. We're making like ways in like fantasy. I've seen a lot, like fantastic like Filipino fantasy writers. Again, a little too hard for me. That's once I've leveled up a little bit. But mystery is like my big genre love. And there's not a lot. All off the top of my head, the only other writer that I know is Jennifer Hillier. She's a Filipino Canadian. She writes thrillers, but again, those are thrillers, right? Those are like, it'll keep that page
those
turning.
Are not relaxing.
Yeah, I finished the book in one sitting, but then I'm lying in bed like, oh my God, this world is awful. People are, like that, which is like true, but like that's not what I need right now. Especially in the middle of a global pandemic, I need something a little happier.
You need some relaxing death-related fiction.
Yes, exactly. Like, ooh, this like really hilarious murder. That's what I'm looking for. So that's one of the because people ask me like, why a cozy? Like, why not like a hard hitting like noir? Or like really saying something about. I'm like, I can still comment. I can still make commentaries on social justice and the justice system and the policing system is as it is in the US, but make it light, make it fun, make it entertaining. There's lots of ways that we can handle these topics, I think. And also, I don't know, like, I don't want there to only be struggle books, right? I don't only want books about our trauma and our pain. I really want books where we're allowed to have fun. Like you said, relaxing, entertaining, falling in love, being the hero, all that good stuff. I want this wide spectrum for us.
Yeah. I feel like because representation is still so scarce in like American culture, it feels like everything we do has to like be this like prestige, like saying something book, when like I just want to read genre fiction. I want to read like just like regular pop that features Asian Americans, or without having it to be about, why we're here and what we're doing in this world, right? Like we should be allowed to make stuff that isn't, Oscar bait, right?
Yeah,
Oscar
exactly.
bait.
Yeah, right. Like I'm not like, this isn't The Sympathizer, right? I'm not going to get a Pulitzer, and I'm fine with that, right? Because that's not what I'm writing for, right? So it's one of those things. Yes, like they're Filipino American because I'm Filipino American. It's a multi-generational family because that's how I grew up, and I want that representation. These things, they affect the character. They affect how the character sees the world. They affect how the world sees the character. But that's not all that the book is. There's just it's meant as nuance as opposed to like the storyline.
Yeah, definitely. And like the things I've noticed in like book Twitter discourse, I mean, God, but like people saying like, oh, like this book by a person of color, it's, it's very tropey. It's nothing new, but it's new to us because we haven't seen people who look like us in those roles. And even with your novel, I mean, there are like signs of like cozy tropes. Like it takes place in a small town, and there's like the food business, which is like also a common trope. But to me, it was like really refreshing because, like we said earlier, this is told from a very Filipino American lens, and of course, like that's kind of how Lila gets her clues and, like travels about in this world. Actually, like talking about the clues, I thought it was very funny how her inside information came from like her extended family's like medical background. It's like, hey, I have a cousin who works like in the ER, or like I have an auntie who, used to be like the head nurse there. And I just thought that was like really, really
some
funny.
might say that's a Filipino American trope right there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those, it's like, oh, I know it's a stereotype, but like, it's true. like my brother's a nurse and his fiance is a Filipino nurse and her entire family, it's one of those, like, it would be like, again, because I want to play with tropes, because you're right. People complain about tropes, but we never get to play with them. We never get to put our spin on it and have our fun with it. And that's what I was doing. Like, fine, there's going to be this stereotype. It's perfect for her network, right? Every Filipino is a nurse. Well, that's her, and she's going to find someone who can get her the information she needs.
One of my favorite things about this book is that you balance like the Filipino American like culture, like the good things about it, and also like some of the negative things about it, because you have the calendar crew, like the meddling aunties, and like it's very easy to make them very annoying and not redeemable at all. But you can really tell that they're very endearing and that they really do care despite their matchmaking and their gossip. And also you have like the negative parts where they criticize Lila's weight, and that's like a very big thing, not in just Filipino American culture, but also Asian American culture, as like and also there's the whole like Americans, they emphasize like being independent and following your dreams, but of course like Asian American culture, that's a little bit different. You're kind of seen as like the black sheep, and that's also like, that's kind of like a gray area. You don't really know if that's like a bad or good thing. So yeah, like that's like one of the things I really love about your book.
Yeah, because that was important with the calendar. Because again, like with the calendar, again, it's so easy for them to be stereotypy or just like the villains or something. And I wanted to show that I get it. This is how you show your love. This is how you know how to show your love. But I don't have to like it, right? Like you know what I mean? So I try to balance that where like you are not trying to tear me down, but at the same time, I'm not going to just accept it and be like okay with it necessarily, or or at least like him do with Lila. And then yeah, that difference between like the American ideal of independence versus like the Asian American idea of like family and community. And I want her to have that gray, because like one is not necessarily better. It's just it's just
Oh yeah,
being
definitely.
torn. It's like that terrible idea of like, well, because you're trying to do what's best for you, you're selfish. And like that's I think the problem that I have trouble with, and especially her. She's 25. She thinks she knows what she wants. She's kind of failed in the beginning, and she's working hard to make sure um, to make it like to rebound from it, I guess. But she feels like people are trying to hold her back and don't really get her. So trying to balance those two things.
All right, so we got we got our greatest hits. Or we got our Filipino American nurses. We got meddling aunties, and we have also the greatest hit of all for Asian American, I guess, culture or literature, media, food, which is this.
Yeah.
You set your book in a restaurant, and food figures. It's in the title, Arsenic and Adobo. Was that something you always wanted to highlight? Like, was that something that you set out to do, or was that?
Yeah. Did you decide right from the get go that this is going to be like a restaurant, setting?
Pretty early on, yeah. So I love food. I love eating. I love books that include food. Culinary cozies are like a subgenre within a subgenre. Like those are like my mom's favorite ones. So she was the one who introduced me to cozies. She first started handing me with a book. It was about like a cookie baker who solves murders. I'm like, this is ridiculous, but I'm just like, oh, but this is kind of fun. And you don't go in for the quality of the writing necessarily. Like this is just like a fun thing. And so I started getting into it. And then when the idea came, I was like, okay, it's definitely going to be a cozy, and it's definitely going to be this kind of cozy. And I say it's because I think food is a shortcut to culture for a lot of diaspora kids. Again, I was born and raised in Chicago. I've never lived in the Philippines. I've visited a few times. So a lot of what I know about it is through the food that my father cooked growing up. My father and my grandmother. My mom couldn't cook this, But this book is dedicated to my dad because he's the one who taught me to appreciate food. And he's the one where I eventually figured out that food could be a love language, right? Because again, not to be too stereotypical, but like my dad, old school stoic Asian guy, the words "I love you" were not something that came out a lot. Physical affection wasn't really a thing too, right? No big hugs or kisses or anything like that. But when he made these big meals, when he fed and took care of our family, that was his way of showing he cared. And so like the Tita Rosie character, like that's kind of her thing. And like I wanted to put like my dad in the story in some way. So like that's part of him in that character.
Yeah, definitely. The whole like Asian people don't say "I love you" in verbiage. They say it through food, and it's like, yeah, that is like a stereotype, but there's truth in it. So yeah,
there's a reason why we all relate to it, right?
Yeah. And so like I was studying Tagalog last year for a while. I had to stop because I got a little too busy. But I asked my Tagalog teacher. It's like so the way you say "I love you" is "mahal kita." And like I was always like, is mahal kita like romantic love? Is it? Can you say it to your family? Is it with your friends? Because like in English it's just "I love you," and it's a catch-all. But other languages have different levels. And she looked at me. And she was just like, oh, nobody says mahal kita in your family. Nobody says "I love you." Like she was trying to imagine within her family saying "I love you" to each other, and she's like, yeah, no, I don't think we would like. Culturally, we don't just say that. She's like, we can say that to our friends, but we would say it jokingly. Like the way you do with your friends. Sometimes you're like, "I love you," and you would say it kind of like that. She's like, we would say it to our friends in that way, but like a real heartfelt "I love you." She's like, no, that's like for movies and stuff. I was just like, oh, okay. So like that idea of like those words exist, but maybe you wouldn't use them in that way because there's other ways to show love. That's that really stuck with me when she told me that. And I was like, oh dang, okay.
That's really interesting. I've like never like heard about that.
Yeah.
Actually, when I was reading your book, I felt so stupid because when all of the Filipino terms were coming up and all of the food, I was just like, oh, I'll just read this like by context clues. I Googled some of the food just to see like what it looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized by the time I finished your book, oh, there's a glossary at the very beginning.
Yeah.
I just, because I was reading this through NetGalley and I was like, oh, I'm just going to jump right in, like chapter 1, let's go. And totally missed the glossary.
No, but thank you. Because, okay, I'm going to be completely honest here. You read it the way I want people to read it.
Oh, I did. Okay.
I include, people are thankful for the glossary. So I'm glad, I put it, but I honestly, I only wrote that glossary to begin with because I knew I was going to have an audiobook. And at the time, I wasn't sure I was going to get a Filipino American narrator or at least one who would know how to. So I was just like, okay, I don't know how many Filipino audiobook narrators there are. If I'm stuck with someone who doesn't know these terms or the pronunciation of these languages, I want to give them some context that they can take, into the recording booth with them. So that's how I started it. And then, eventually I found out like, oh, I will have, I'm like, oh, cool. I will have a Phil Am narrator. That's amazing. But I already made this glossary. I'm sure it's helpful for some people. So I might as well turn that into. So, it's one of like, it's even a line in the book. It's just like, I don't know, if you don't know, Google it. Right. So like, I feel like so many people want you to hold their hand when they see terms they don't know. It's like, that's what, like you said, like you used context. You used the Google because we have the internet at our hands. So like, I would like people to do it that way. But I mean, like, no shade to people who enjoy the glossary because it helps them. Because, obviously looking at it written, it's not how it's spelled. Like I had a lot of problems with some of the honorifics, like ate, right? Like, so her older cousin Bernadette, it looks like it's 8, right? It's spelled ATE. And I know that would be an issue. So like, no, it's pronounced ate. So things like that are why I included the glossary. But like, I mean, I'm glad you were able to understand it, like, getting through without using the glossary to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, I do this for like Western books as well. Like when old British period pieces, I'm like, I don't know what that is. Like, let me Google it. So yeah, it's just the thing that I do all across the board. And I think people who are unfamiliar with Asian culture should definitely have that habit as well.
Because people complain about it, but I'm just like, like there are huge swaths of Jane Eyre that are in French and there's no context clues and it's not translated. And everyone's like, oh, that Bronte, it's so, but when it's like Asian terminology or non-Western terminology, they're just like, well, I don't get it, so, ugh. So I had mixed feelings on that.
Oh, we all do. It's an Asian thing, I think.
Yeah.
But like, speaking of like food, do you have like a favorite Filipino dish? And you were just like, I have to put this in this book. Like, it is my favorite. There's no way it's like not making it in the book.
It's hard because like my favorite Filipino dish is one that like, okay, again, I know I should not be catering to Western audiences, but like we're trying to describe it in a book doesn't make it sound like the most appealing. It's called kare kare, and it's an oxtail and tripe stew, with like eggplant and green beans and like leafy vegetables, and it's cooked in like a thick peanut sauce. Someone says it's similar to like, is it Panang curry that has like a peanut based sauce, and you eat it with like fermented shrimp paste called bagong, and so it's like like explaining it, it's just like, oh yeah, oxtail and tripe, isn't that everybody's fave? Yeah, fermented shrimp, but
sounds good to me. I don't know.
yeah. So, but like, it's so good, like just with mounds of white rice, it is so comforting because it's like a nice, like hearty, warming meal, and it's so delicious. And I do want to include it in a book someday. I just need to think of like a really good way to describe it that makes it sound tasty. The descriptions are probably the hardest part for me.
I bet. Like, how do you describe what something tastes like? Aside from like sweet, spicy, like salty, like whatever. So I really appreciated all of the descriptive food writing. I was so hungry, and like I love everything that is ube. So like every single time when Lila pulled out like the ube cookies, I'm like, God damn it. Like, there's no place for Actually, there's a cafe very close to me that is run by Filipino Americans, and they have like ube flavored like milkshake and cookies and whatnot. But they were closed during COVID, and I was like, no. So reading this book definitely made me hungry and like miss like a lot of the desserts, because there's a lot of desserts. I was actually like pretty surprised, because I did not know that like Filipino Americans had like so much sugar in a lot of their dishes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, like we are the people who have banana ketchup. You know what I mean? Like, and sweet spaghetti, right? So like sugar is like a top tier food group, I think, in a lot of Filipino cooking.
Yeah, I mean, as like a coffee drinker, like Marvin too, you're like a coffee addict as well. Just like the number of sugar
I just like coffee.
The number of sugar packets and cream that was like described in the book when like I was just like, how can they do that? That is like sacrilegious. Like, so I like totally got it. Like when Lila was just like, coffee is like, what are you doing with that instant coffee? That is terrible. Like, no.
Is that also a trope? Because my aunt and my parents love like Folgers instant coffee, and for the first like month of the quarantine, that's all I had to drink, and I was
oh my god,
until I like I'm just gonna internet order coffee beans and like buy a grinder, because like I can't take this crystal shit anymore.
Yeah, so I mean, I keep instant coffee around for like when my mom comes to visit, because she wants that Nescafe, that Kopiko. You know, when I taught like in Korea, it was just like little packets of like Maxim Gold.
Maxim is a classic. Yeah.
You know, when I was in the Philippines and I was staying with family, like every time for merienda, like it was always like Nescafe 3-in-1, Kopiko 3-in-1, like never like coffee. And I'm actually a black, like I learned to appreciate black coffee, so that's usually how I take it. So and you know, again in my head, like I needed her to be like really bougie, and I'm like, that's something she can like really latch on to. Right, where her family would be all about instant coffee. They don't taste the difference. They don't understand why you'd pay $5 for a cup of just bitter bleh when you can have this sugary, creamy, cheap beverage. You know, so that's something I wanted to latch onto as well.
Yeah.
So I really love the small town aspect of your book. Shady Palms is like that was a name, let me tell you, because this book takes place in Chicago, and like sometimes I forgot because like characters would be standing in the snow. I'm like, why are they standing in snow? Like, this is Shady Palms. Like, isn't this Southern California? But it's not. It's not. So can you like, and also I think you captured the whole like horrifying experience of coming back to your small town like after like numerous years, and you run into like old high school nemesis, because like I could definitely identify like all of the side characters in this book being like, yep, I know a Janet, like I know a Bernadette, like the people that like that our parents pit us against each other since childhood. Yeah, definitely know who they are. So I just want to ask, like, how did you come up with the small town Shady Palms, and you have like a very large cast of characters. Like, how did you like manage to keep track of all of them?
So like this is like a fictional town, like a couple hours outside of Chicago. And again, one, because I read so many cozies, and two, because I really wanted to play with those tropes. It had to be a small town. It couldn't just be a neighborhood of Chicago, not for this particular story. But I knew like I didn't want it to be a real place, because then I'd have to do research, and like, you know, I'd have that person telling me like, you know, that river's not in the right place. So I wanted to make sure I made it up. And I also wanted it to be like its own like ridiculous little world. So like that, you know, hence the name like Shady Palms, but it's like in the Midwest, just outside of Chicago. So like at first I came up with a more like stereotypical name. I think I saw like the name Shady Grove. I'm like, oh, that sounds good. And it turns out there is a Shady Grove, Illinois. And I was like, so I'm like, Shady Pines? I'm like, no, that's the Golden Girls retirement home. Okay. And then I was like, there's not going to be a place named Shady Palms. Like, that's just a ridiculous name. And so like I kind of put it as a placeholder to see if maybe I could make it work, and it stayed. So I had a lot of fun with that. And like a beta reader kind of gave me some really good feedback, because like, again, like I said earlier, like I hate writing descriptions. So when it came to this town, people are like, what does this town look like? How many people are there? She's just kind of floating in this white empty space. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Let me kind of fill this out a little bit. So I kind of put in like a backstory of like why it's called Shady Palms, and like, you know, this guy with all these like tacky plastic palms like lining the main street to give like a little bit of like color and stuff. So that's how I came up with that. As for the large cast, yeah, that was an issue. I kind of wish, you know, it's one of those, it's such a balancing act, especially as with, because you need enough people to be suspects, right? Like if there's two people, you're like, well, 50-50, right? And that's really boring. I also wanted to, because this character had a life and a history before the story starts. And she wouldn't have like a small family necessarily, right? Her immediate family is small, but because her family is the way they are, obviously there's this large extended, you know, not by blood, but the aunties and the cousins and you know, that they're all connected to in some way. So that's like what felt right to me. It felt good as a character choice to make her feel real. It felt good from a mystery standpoint because this is her network that she could tap into. But from a writing standpoint, it really was a balancing act because I'm just like, oh my goodness, everyone, there's like 10 people in the scene and they all need to talk at some point, like the dinner scene, like where they're all kind of almost like, oh geez, why did I have so many people over for dinner? Like, oh, so yeah. And then now in future books, because like it's a 3-book deal. Hopefully I can write more than that, but it all takes place in the same world. It all follows the same protagonist. So like I have to work in not all, but most of these characters while also introducing new ones in these future books. And it's super fun.
I'm sure you'll do a good job. I mean, like even though like some of like the characters you see them like once or twice and don't see them again, like I really enjoyed them. And just like the sheer diversity of the cast too. I was like, oh yeah, there's like a South Asian American, there's like there's like a mixed race Asian, and I was like, this is a very diverse town, and I don't really see that in a lot of mysteries because unfortunately in a lot of mystery novels it takes place in, I don't know, in like a quaint English town or or like a gritty, I don't know, like a gritty underbelly city, and there's like no Asian people in it. So
I mean, that's true for both mysteries and Hallmark movies.
Yeah,
that's true.
Has your mom read your book yet?
No, she has the Book of the Month edition. So like she is reading it now, which is just like, oh, because oh my goodness, she's very loving and caring and supportive, but she's also Asian mom. So like, I showed her an early version of my cover, like the not finalized, like it was the initial sketch, which they knew was going to change. And they're like, I want your feedback, but what do you think of this? And I was so excited. Like I showed my mom and like, but through like Messenger, like I sent it to her to the Messenger and I went to go do something. And she was just like, I hate it. And then I didn't respond fast enough to her message. So she called me and she was like, hey, did you see my message? I hate it. And I was just like, mommy, what, like I'm super excited about this, and she's just like, but that's not your cover, right? I'm like, no, I'm gonna give feedback. I just wanted to show you what we're starting with. And she's like, oh, okay, but like like she loves
at
it
least
now.
It wasn't your writing though. If it was she read your book and she's like, I hate it, it's like, oh, I mean, my
yeah
because your mom also worked in publishing and this is her favorite genre. I imagine that the stakes have never been higher.
And she works at the library now too, right? So she's like, so again, like she will brag about me all the time. Like even before everyone knew that I was a writer at the library before I got like an agent, before I got a deal. And I'm just like, oh, mommy. And then, you know, so like, again, she is like my biggest support, you know, like she, like now she wants like my cover on everything so she could show everybody, which is why I can't tell her anything anymore. Cause she like really wants to like spread the word. So like, don't worry, editors, I promise I'm not telling her secrets anymore. It's not going to spread. But yeah, so again, it's really nice to have someone who's so supportive of my writing, even when she is so critical in other ways.
So this is a series, and man, like the second book is usually usually harder to write compared to the first book. From what we've heard from other writers who write like trilogies and series, I don't know how long it took you to write the first book, but definitely for like the second and third books, you have deadlines. So I just want to ask, like, how have you been coping with that, especially when you're writing mystery, where you kind of have to have structure for everything?
Second book syndrome is so real. And second book syndrome in like a global pandemic when everything is just like bleh, it was really hard. So Arsenic and Adobo took about 1.5 to 2 years to complete almost. And then book 2, I had to turn in a draft in like 8 or 9 months or something like that.
Oh my God. That's like being pregnant and like, wow.
Yeah, that book, baby. Yeah. But like, there's like, you're writing it while you're also editing book 1, you know? So like the way things are now, like I need to promo book 1. I'm going to soon start editing book 2, and I am currently writing book 3, you know? So it's like a lot of things like stacked up at once. And yeah, like book 1 came so easily to me, like, because again, the idea came and it just flowed from there. This is just, yes, it's easy because I don't have to do as much character work because I know who she is. But at the same time, I want her to grow a little bit, but she can't grow too much because these are technically like standalones, right? You're supposed to be able to pick up a book, any number book in this series, and kind of know who they are and understand what's going on, right? It's not like an overarching plot the way it would be if it was like a fantasy series. So that has its pros and cons, right? Like I'm free to come up with whatever. I don't need to necessarily have those ties to the previous book, but it is hard because like, how do I reintroduce these characters to new readers without like boring the old ones? You know, how do I hit all the genre expectations of a cozy mystery without just repeating the same beats that I did in book 1? You know, that kind of, how can I have this character have an arc and grow and change, but she's not so different again that like if you pick up a book in any part of the series, you're confused as to who she is and what she's doing, you know? So that's kind of what I'm balancing right now.
Good luck.
No tips, Marvin?
I mean, I'm excited to see how the murders are going to work, because creative murders, I don't want to spoil anything in the first book, but let me say like how the main victim died. I was like, oh, like this is interesting. Like it's a very unique way to kill someone. So I am excited to read the second book and see how you decided to kill off a character. And that sounds really morbid, but because we're talking about cozies, like I don't feel bad about talking about dead bodies. So, yeah.
My search history is very interesting. I can tell you that.
Yeah. So as we wrap up our interview, so great to speak with you. Congratulations again on the book launch. According to your bio, you have tons of very geeky pursuits. So I'm interested in what you're excited about right now. Like, what are you reading? What are you watching?
Right now, I'm actually reading, I guess, you know, again, I need things that keep me happy. So I'm reading a lot of like diverse romance. I'm currently, I was listening to her on your show recently. I'm almost done with Loathe at First Sight by Suzanne Park.
Oh, yeah, Suzanne.
So that, and I'm also like How to Fail at Flirting by Denise Williams. So like just like BIPOC romance is just like really delivering lately. And it's making me so happy. Anything by Talia Hibbert and Alyssa Cole, you know, that's where I'm at. Video games, I'm like addicted to my Switch. Like if I can name like the top 3 things that got me through the pandemic, it's like BIPOC romance, Nintendo Switch, and D&D, because I recently joined I joined a D&D group at the beginning of the pandemic, to kind of a virtual one.
Yeah.
So like Stardew Valley, if I want something very relaxing. I really like Japanese RPGs. So there's a game called Persona 5 Strikers.
Oh my God, yeah. So
the
good.
music and the design is so good. It's
I have the
such a beautiful
soundtrack.
game.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite like writing things, because it's like, because I don't really like listening to words with lyrics, but like if it's like in another language, or if it's not as easy to understand, it's just upbeat enough to keep me going. So yeah, video game music is really good. Anything else? I like playing weird dating sims sometimes. So like Dream Daddy. There's one called Later Daters where you're a senior citizen trying to get it on at like at a senior living home.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Monster Prom, where you are indeed a monster trying to find a date for prom. Like just weird things like that.
Yeah.
All right, so we're winding down, and I want to give you a chance to share with our audience like what you hope they get out of your book and where they can find you.
Sure. I mean, honestly, I just want people to have a good time, to have again, because I'm not trying to educate people about Filipino American culture, but I do want them to appreciate how it's woven in and how it enhances the mystery genre, as opposed to like if it was just like a regular, just like white protagonist in a white town, right? Again, like it's how it adds nuance and how we are able to just have all different kinds of stories. And I also really want you to appreciate the food because I think Filipino food is amazing and doesn't get enough love. As for where to find me, I'm at MPM the Writer on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm never on Facebook, but I have to say it anyway for, my pub team likes it. But I'm mostly on Twitter and Instagram. And you can also check out my website at www.miapmanansala.com. If you sign up for my newsletter, I include Filipino-inspired recipes in every newsletter. I do book giveaways. I love talking about the media I'm consuming at the time. I also do a lot of candle recommendations for all you like candle fans. Again, another pandemic obsession. So if you're into that, I think you might enjoy my newsletter.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mia, for joining us on Books and Boba. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And congratulations again on your book launch.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
And that was our interview with Mia P. Manansala, the author of Arsenic and Adobo, available for sale on May 4th. Thank you once again to Mia for joining us and chatting all about her book. We're very excited to see what you all think about it when it comes out into the world. Needless to say, both Rira and I were very much into not only the setting, but the story, the mystery. It just hit on all cylinders, right?
Yeah, it was a fun read. Yeah, like we definitely need more fun reads and humorous murders in our lives.
Yeah. Before we go, Rira, once again, remind us what we're reading this month for our book club.
We are reading How to Pronounce Knife, a short story collection by Suvankam Tamavangsa.
Yeah, it is a collection of short stories centering around the Lao American community, and we'll be talking about that at the end of the month. And with that, we'll see you next time on Books and Boba. Thanks so much for listening. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Books and Boba. This podcast was hosted by Marvin Yue and Rira Yu and edited and produced by Marvin Yue. Follow the book club on Twitter and Instagram by going to @BooksandBoba and engage with us on Goodreads on our Goodreads group. You can also check out past episodes of the podcast by going to booksandboba.com and by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget, you can support Books and Boba and Asian American authors by purchasing books at our bookshop.org account. Check out the link in our show notes and also at booksandboba.com. Books and Boba is a proud member of the Potluck Podcast Collective, a collective of Asian American hosted podcasts featuring unique voices and stories from the Asian diaspora. Learn more about the collective and check out our fellow Potluck shows by visiting the website podcastpotluck.com. Thanks for listening.
Kathy? Kim?
Steve? Where have you been? We haven't seen you for 7 years.
Has it been that long?
Uh-huh.
Oh. I was on a fishing boat. Training. It's part of the plan.
What training? What plan?
The third season of the Korean drama podcast!
Okay, we're doing this again? Okay, but there's no body switching in this one, right?
No! The only thing we're switching is the fact that we're going to watch a good drama this time. From 2020 called Itaewon Class! A story about starting a restaurant and a dish that Koreans love called revenge.
I thought you were going to say kimchi jjigae.
I thought you were going to say juke.
Those two. Koreans love those two.
Listen to the Korean Drama Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Part of the Potluck Podcast Collective.